parents take sister on vacation instead of me. Later on, she ruined family vacation and got arrested. Now my parents finally realize her true colors. I, a 23-year-old female, have a younger sister, Lisa, who is 18 years old and, in my opinion, the true incarnation of evil on earth. Over the years, I've tried to convince my parents of Lisa's manipulative nature, but they never believed me until now. For context, my relationship with my parents has always been somewhat strained, mainly because of Lisa. My parents absolutely adore her because my mother had a miscarriage before Lisa was born, which deeply affected her. Lisa, born a few years later, was regarded as their miracle child, a beacon of hope and joy that healed the pain of their previous loss. My parents showered her with affection and attention, turning her into the center of our family's universe. I loved my younger sister when we were children, but I slowly started realizing that Lisa had an incredible talent for manipulation that none of my family members could grasp. She knew how to twist stories in her favor and was a master at playing the victim. Once, on my birthday, I received an amazing antique pocket watch from our grandparents. I was so happy because my grandmother told me it was a family heirloom. Lisa, clearly jealous, kept asking if I could share it with her. I said no, since it was a gift for me on my birthday. She tried to persuade our parents, but since it was from our grandparents, they couldn't do much. That night, Lisa, knowing I was terrified of spiders, placed a house spider inside my pillowcase. I awoke to the horrifying sensation of a spider crawling over my skin and started screaming. My parents rushed to my room, concerned. Lisa acted all surprised and caring, but later she admitted to me, with a creepy grin, that she put the spider there to teach me a lesson. I was shocked by how casually she confessed without any remorse. Another time, I had a crush on my classmate Mark and finally had the courage to invite him over to watch a movie. I was giddy and excited, carefully picking out a dress to impress him. But as soon as Mark arrived, Lisa deliberately spilled a glass of juice all over my dress and started laughing at me. I was mortified and had to change, trying to hide my embarrassment. As if that wasn't enough, Lisa started telling Mark embarrassing stories from my childhood, making me feel utterly humiliated. She didn't leave us alone the entire time we watched the movie. When Mark was about to leave, Lisa smirked and told him that he could do much better than me. Mark, who had been uncomfortable the entire time, left in a hurry. I couldn't believe how cruel and cunning my younger sister could be. Over the years, I told my parents about her antics several times, but they always chalked it up to her being young and naive. They just couldn't see her for who she really was. Whenever I complained, they dismissed me, thinking of me as the troublemaker in the family. So, I eventually stopped speaking up about her. Lisa continued being their favorite child while I often felt like the outsider in my own family. I focused on my studies and managed to get into a good college, giving me a chance to move out and have a better life. In college, I stayed away from home during breaks, often spending them with my friends' families instead. My parents didn't mind, thinking I was just being independent and wanting to enjoy some time away from home. When Lisa graduated from high school, she didn't have the grades for college, so she settled for community college and never had to move out of our parents' place. These days, I work at a multinational corporation in San Francisco and genuinely enjoy my job. I stay in touch with my parents but rarely visit home. I don't maintain any contact with Lisa whatsoever. Recently, my father had a near-fatal heart attack. Fortunately, he survived by some miracle and was rushed to the hospital. When my mother called to tell me about it, I immediately booked my tickets and flew back home to be there for them. The doctors prescribed numerous medications for my father and strongly advised him to start working out. Since being discharged, my father has expressed a desire to spend more time with us as a family, telling me how lucky he was to be saved from the brink of death. I understood where my dad was coming from, so I continued spending a few days at our house. My job allows me to work remotely, so it was no problem. However, I noticed that Lisa was deeply agitated that I was back. I tried my best to avoid her because we were both older now, and I didn't want to argue after our dad's heart attack. One morning during breakfast, my father suggested that we all go on a family vacation, as it had been a long time since we went somewhere together. Initially, I had my reservations, but knowing how important it was to my dad, I agreed. As for Lisa, she wasn't thrilled about it, but she had no choice but to go along with the plan. My father made all the arrangements for our flights and accommodations. I had planned my leave from work in advance and informed my colleagues not to contact me during this time, as I genuinely wanted to enjoy quality time with my parents. However, when we arrived at the airport, I found out that my flight ticket had been canceled. I exchanged puzzled looks with my father, who kept insisting that he had booked and paid for my ticket. When we checked further, it turned out that out of the 4 tickets, the one with my name on it had been mysteriously canceled. As I stood there, trying to comprehend the situation, I looked over at Lisa. She had a sly smile on her face as she stared at me. It was a look I had seen many times before, the same expression she wore when she had successfully pulled off one of her manipulative tricks. I realized at that moment that she was the one who had canceled my ticket, probably from my father's computer. I started yelling at her as she continued to stand there, smiling at me. I pointed out to my parents that it was Lisa's doing, as she never wanted me to go on this family vacation in the first place. Instead of believing me, my mother immediately dismissed my claim, saying, "Your sister would never do something like that." She went on to tell me that I should stop being jealous of my younger sister and that it was just a freak accident that my ticket had been canceled. My father also tried to justify it as an airline mistake and urged me not to blame Lisa. I was utterly frustrated that my parents couldn't fathom that their beloved miracle child could be behind such a deception. At this point, there was nothing I could do. My ticket was already canceled, and there were no other flights for that day. While it was possible for me to catch a flight the next day, I didn't relish the idea of traveling alone and joining them later. After all, this was supposed to be a family trip. I was also dreading sharing a room with Lisa during the trip. I had hoped that she had matured over the years, but if she was behind the cancellation of my flight ticket, I couldn't help but wonder what other schemes she might have in store to make my trip miserable. My father initially hesitated, suggesting that they could all go back home and plan a new trip later. But then he started talking about how it had been ages since he went on a vacation. My mother agreed, telling me that I always travel a lot for work, so I wasn't going to miss out on much if I didn't go. Their comments really got to me. It felt like they wanted me to insist they continue the vacation without me. I told them they were welcome to continue their vacation, and they readily agreed. Although I didn't want the money they had spent on tickets and rooms to go to waste, I was sad that they didn't care whether I joined them or not. It became clear that they didn't mind going on this family vacation as a family of 3. So, there I was, standing alone at the airport as my parents and Lisa headed for their much-anticipated vacation. I decided to return to my home in San Francisco, not wanting to spend a day further alone in our family house. I tried my best to put the incident behind me and focused on enjoying the rest of my leave that I had already taken from work. I reconnected with old friends and spent my days engrossed in books, turning my break into a solo staycation. During the trip, my parents would sometimes video call me, and I could see how much they were enjoying the trip without me. It was like my absence didn't affect their trip in any way. Although I wasn't too heartbroken about missing the vacation, I couldn't help feeling excluded. It was yet another reminder of the favoritism that had always existed in our family. I hoped that someday they would see through Lisa's true nature. A few days into their vacation, I woke up to several missed calls from my mother. Worried that my father's health might have taken a sudden downturn, I immediately called her back. Thankfully, she picked up, but she sounded extremely distressed. I asked her if everything was okay, and she went on to explain that something deeply troubling had happened. Apparently, my parents had noticed that my father's essential heart medications were disappearing day by day. It was an alarming situation, as my father couldn't afford to miss his medication given his fragile health. They were in a foreign country and didn't know if the same medicine would be available outside of the US. They were genuinely concerned about the missing pills and searched their room everywhere in vain. My mother had gone to Lisa's hotel room, which was adjacent to theirs, to borrow some sunscreen while Lisa was out. To her utter shock and dismay, she discovered all the missing medicines carefully tucked away inside Lisa's bedside table. It was a chilling revelation, and she immediately called for my father. He rushed in and found all his medication that had gone missing the last few days. I guess this was when the truth dawned on them that their beloved daughter, the so-called miracle child, had been intentionally jeopardizing my father's health and putting him at great risk. My mother's voice quivered as she asked if they should confront Lisa about this. I asked her not to speak to Lisa about this until they were back home. They needed to gather their thoughts, emotions, and evidence to face Lisa with the undeniable truth. I knew that speaking to Lisa now would be futile, as she was a master manipulator and would likely concoct excuses to evade responsibility. However, something unexpected must have transpired that night. My parents must have confronted her about it. I received a late-night call from my father, his voice trembling as he informed me that Lisa was in jail. I was taken aback. He recounted that Lisa had a full-blown tantrum when they asked her about the medications, throwing objects and shouting insults. Her rage was primarily targeted at my father, accusing him of booking a ticket for me when he should have never allowed me on their family vacation. She told them that if they continued having a relationship with me, she would teach them a lesson they would never forget. Lisa continued to lash out, and the situation escalated rapidly until someone from the hotel called the authorities. When the officers arrived, she refused to calm down and insulted them, which led to her being taken into custody. Lisa would be released after 24 hours, and there was nothing my parents could do at the moment. Desperate to return home after Lisa's release, my parents tried to reschedule their flight. However, their plans were foiled when they discovered that their passports and wallets were missing. It turns out that Lisa had either discarded their passports or hidden them away, but for now, they were stranded in a foreign country with no passports or wallets. I guess this was the first time my parents started to see my sister for who she really was. My mother, who had persistently defended Lisa for all these years, was now begging me to help, as they didn't have any money or documentation to fly out of there. She was overwhelmed, shocked, and distraught at the realization of her angelic daughter's true nature. I told them not to worry and that I would send them money using Western Union, but they had to find their passports first so they could return home. I was certain that Lisa hadn't discarded them. My parents were finally realizing that I had been the honest one all along about her antics. Thank you very much for watching to the story so far. I suggest you to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss tomorrow's stories.